Mrs. Johnston here. It is time for Knowledge and Social Studies. We are beginning Unit 7 on Kings and Queens. Today, we will begin learning about kings and queens. Just like the teacher is the leader of the classroom and the president is the leader of our country, the United States, some countries in the world have leaders called kings and queens. Kings and queens are different leaders from teachers or presidents because they are not hired or elected. Instead, they are born into special families called royal families. A king is a man from a royal family who is the leader of a country. If a king is a man from a royal family who is the leader of a country, then what do you think a queen is? Did you say a queen is a woman from a royal family who is the leader of a country? The children of kings and queens are called princes and princesses, and they may one day grow up to become kings and queens. Kings and queens and their royal families live quite differently than other people do. Many different countries in the world have been ruled by kings and queens. Long ago, many countries had kings and queens, but now fewer countries have kings and queens. Mrs. Johnston back, and I have a globe today. The globe shows all the continents on Earth. So we live in United States. We live in Michigan, that is our state, and many of us live in the town or city of Cadillac. Today's story, we are going to talk about Great Britain. It is a country that has still a king and queen. Great Britain is in the continent of Europe. It is in the United Kingdom. Some other countries that still have kings and queens today are Cambodia, Denmark, Japan, Malaysia, Morocco, Monaco, Norway, Saudi Arabia, Spain, and Tonga. Let's see if you are listening to the introduction of our new unit. Is a man from a royal family who is the leader of a country a king or a queen? Did you respond or say a king? If you did, great job. Is a woman from a royal family who is the leader of a country a prince or a queen? Did you tell Mrs. Johnston a queen? If you did, you were listening. Which country has a king or queen today? The United States of America or Great Britain? Did you respond or say Great Britain? I hope you were listening during our introduction of our new unit on kings and queens. Listen carefully to find out about different European kings and queens from long, long ago, including the places they lived and all the different royal things that belonged to them. Look at this fancy building. What do you think a building like this might be used for? How many of you said a hotel or a big family's home, a mansion or a castle? Can you believe that this was actually someone's house? Well, it's not just any house, it's a palace. This palace used to belong to the Queen of France. Before I continue with the story, that Queen of France still lived in Europe, but in France, which is here, and our story is going to take place in Great Britain. So they are close. What do you think it's like inside? It must be nice if it were built for a queen. In fact, this palace has 440 rooms inside. As the leaders of their countries, kings and queens often had the biggest and best homes in the land, known as palaces or castles. As the leader, the queen or king rules a particular area of land and the people who live there. A king or queen leads and makes decisions about a particular area of land and the people who live there. This area of land is called a kingdom. There used to be many, many kingdoms in the world. Today, however, there are not as many kingdoms or kings and queens as there used to be. Tell me about this picture. Who do you think this person might be? Did you say someone important? A king or queen? Someone from the royal family? Did you respond with any of Mrs. Johnston's suggestions? It's good to be king. That's an old saying. And if you look at this king, whose name was King Richard II of England, you begin to get the idea of why this saying holds true. If you walked into a palace in England hundreds of years ago and saw this person, you wouldn't have any trouble guessing he was king. As the most important and powerful people in the kingdoms, kings and queens always got the best of everything: the best houses, the best clothing, and the best food. Kings did not have to say please and thank you. They didn't even have to dress themselves. They had servants to do that for them. Servants are the men and women who are hired and paid to take care of the king and queen, as well as their home and land. Pretty much everything a king or queen used, touched, or owned was called royal. If something is royal, it belongs to a king or queen. The soft, fluffy robes King Richard II wore were the royal robes. The cup he drank from was called the royal cup, and If it was royal, that meant that only the king, queen, or someone in the royal family, such as his daughter, the princess, or his son, the prince, was allowed to use it. King Richard II is holding two things in this picture. In one hand, he is holding the royal orb. This is the royal orb. And in the other hand, he is holding the royal scepter. This is the royal scepter. These were ceremonial objects or things that the king wore or held just to remind people who was in charge. That hat he is wearing is called a crown, which is no ordinary hat. Crowns were usually made out of some kind of precious metal, like gold or silver, and decorated with fancy jewels, like rubies and emeralds and sapphires. These jewels were called the crown jewels. Like the scepter and the orb, the crown was an important symbol of the king's power. A symbol is something that represents or stands for something else. When people saw the king's crown, they knew that the person who wore it was powerful and important. Here's a close up picture of a crown. It's made of gold and loaded with fancy pearls and other jewels. A hat like this would not be good for keeping the sun out of your eyes, and it wouldn't be very good at keeping your head warm. But if you were wearing it, it meant that you were the king or queen, the ruler of a kingdom. A few hundred years ago, it would have been nice to be a king or queen ruling your very own kingdom, making all the rules and laws that people had to follow. But it would also have been very difficult. Kings and queens had big responsibilities. Every day, people came to them to ask for money or advice, and every day they had to make important decisions about things that were happening in the kingdom. A famous king named Charlemagne was so important that an artist made a stained glass window with his image. Look at his fancy chair. The king's chair was called a throne, and as you might imagine, only the king was allowed to sit there. His throne was raised up on a platform, so he would appear tall and important, even when he was sitting down. What's that in his hand? Charlemagne is holding a sword and an orb to remind people that he is king. Over the next couple of weeks, you will learn more about kingdoms, kings, queens, and everything having to do with royalty. Let's see if you can fill in the blank. As the leader, the blank rules a particular area of land and the people who live there. Did you respond with king or queen? As the leader, the king or queen rules a particular area of land and the people who live there. What is a king and what is a queen? Did you say a king is the male ruler of a kingdom and that a queen is the female ruler of a kingdom? What does a king do? And what does a queen do? Did you say something like this? Both a king and a queen rule over a kingdom, which is a particular area of land and the people who live there. What is a kingdom? Did you say a kingdom is the area of land ruled by a king or queen? What is in this picture? This picture shows a palace, which is the home of a king or queen and their family. What do you see in this picture? Did your answers include this shows a king and his royal objects, including a throne, a crown, an orb, and a scepter? Are there still kings and queens today? Yes, there are still kings and queens today, but not as many as long ago. I want you to discuss this question with the adult that's helping you today. What do you think are good things about being a king or queen? And what do you think are the bad things about being a king or queen? Mrs. Johnston, her thoughts on that are that the good thing about being a king and queen would be all of the fine clothing that I have. The bad thing about being a king and a queen is having to make some very hard decisions. I hope that you enjoyed our introduction story to our new unit. What are kings and queens?